Hey there, I know a lot of you working professionals out there are looking to crack that 655 plus GMAT score, but working a full-time job and GMAT prep can feel like a real struggle. The good news is, with the right approach, it's totally doable to nail that target score. That also in just 4 months. So let's start with a reality check. Prepping for the GMAT while holding down a demanding job is no walk in the park. You're gonna have to make some sacrifices and put in a lot of hard work too. But I promise you, it'll be worth it when you see that sweet 655 plus score. I suggest that you note down all the things because there's gonna be a lot of tips for you guys in this video. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and share it with your GMAT buddies too. You see, we all have different circadian rhythms that determine when our brains are firing on all cylinders. Some people are morning birds while others are night owls. I'll give you a personal example. I've always been a night owl, someone who is sharper and more focused in the evenings and late at night rather than the mornings. So if you're a night owl like me, trying to cram your GMAT studying in the early morning hours is just setting yourself up for failure. Instead, schedule those prep sessions for later in the day when your brain is in the peak problem-crushing mode. The key is to figure out when you operate best and plan your routine around that rhythm. It's all about working smarter, not harder, you know? Next up, we've got to address a trap that a lot of us fall into, the binge study marathon. People often try to pull a 9-hour cram session on a Saturday, but here's the thing, I strongly caution against this approach. Why? Well, because it drains you and then you fall and make careless mistakes, and on an adaptive test like the GMAT, those unforced errors can seriously affect your score potential. Instead, keep those study sessions focused and relatively short, like 2 hours on weekdays and 3 to 4 hours max on weekends. As I always say, if you practice exhausted or not as sharp as usual, you're gonna make careless errors, and we don't want that. Quality prep trumps mindless quantity every single time. Don't be a hero trying to power through 12-hour study binges. That's just a recipe for burnout and silly mistakes. Now, if you're someone struggling to find enough time for GMAT prep because of work or other commitments, here's some solid advice. Prioritize the areas that will take the longest for you to improve. Using the example of verbal areas like critical reasoning and reading comprehension, I've noted that these take more time to improve compared to something like brushing up on specific quant areas. So, if you're short on study time, cover those stubborn weaknesses first, especially the ones that require a bigger time investment upfront to fix. But don't completely neglect your other areas either. Balance is still key. Speaking of balance, let's talk about the importance of taking breaks during this intense GMAT journey. I'll share a crazy story that perfectly illustrates why you can't go full superhero mode with your prep. Charles, who's the founder of GMAT Ninja, had a student who was so driven and hard-charging that she actually hid practice sets from him and ended up secretly doing 4,000 LSAT questions. 4,000 questions. That's just nuts. As I've said, your brain needs rest and rejuvenation. Pushing yourself to the point of burnout is counterproductive. The moral of the story? Well, don't be that friend who becomes a total GMAT martyr. Schedule regular breaks and make time for your hobbies and social life. A well-rested brain is a high-performing brain on the test day. So for those of you with really demanding jobs, being open and upfront with your workplace about your GMAT goals can make a huge difference. Imagine an investment banking student who would show up for late-night tutoring at 9:30 p.m. after her brutal work hours. Can you even imagine trying to study after a day like that? But in situations like this, I recommend having an open dialogue with your boss and teammates. As I've said, most people are gonna say, hey, this is great. I've got somebody working for me who's trying to improve themselves. I want to support them. You'd be surprised at how understanding people can be when you level with them about your GMAT goals. Transparency might even help them ease up on your workload a bit during this period. Now let's talk about managing your focus and energy, especially on those days when you're completely drained from work. We've all experienced those brutal 9 to 10 hour days, factoring in the soul-sucking commute. By the time you get home, you're running on fumes and the thought of opening a GMAT book sounds like torture. My advice? Well, don't force yourself to do high-intensity practice on days like that. it's just going to lead to sloppy work. Instead, adjust your approach and do something lower intensity like watching concept videos or reviewing notes. The key is being realistic about your limits. An exhausted brain is not going to give you its A game no matter how hard you push it. Save those focused practice sessions for when you're physically and mentally fresh. Which brings me to my next point. Pacing yourself for this marathon is crucial. Do you know that friend who boasts about being a total GMAT martyr? Well, pulling all-nighters, suffering in isolation, the whole thing? Yeah, I say adopting that "I'm gonna suffer alone in my cage studying and working nonstop" mindset is incredibly counterproductive. Instead, I emphasize the importance of sustainable self-care during your prep. Get enough sleep, eat well, exercise, and for the love of all things holy, maintain a social life. As I bluntly put it, nobody's gonna give you a prize for suffering through the GMAT, and it's gonna hurt you if you suffer too much. I've got a point. An overworked, malnourished brain is simply not going to perform at its peak on test day. Take care of yourself first. For those of you struggling with the verbal section, specifically those headache-inducing critical reasoning and reading comprehension questions, I have some excellent tips for improving through consistent reading practice. First up, I suggest reading literary fiction novels to sharpen your comprehension skills in a low-pressure way. Novels challenge your brain without the added stress of GMAT-style questions. I also recommend publications like The Economist to expose you to GMAT-level reading material and vocabulary. But here's a pro tip. If you want GMAT-specific practice for those brutal humanities and social science passages, look at LSAT reading comprehension practice sets. As I've explained, the LSAT reading comprehension sets cover similar topics and have that same level of difficulty. Two birds, one stone. Efficient prep for the win. The last piece of advice I'll leave you with is all about avoiding premature burnout in your GMAT journey. Yes, you need to put in the hard work and effort, but as I stress, don't fall into the trap of thinking you have to suffer endlessly without any joy in your life. Now, let me share an example that illustrates the power of these strategies. Sarah was a marketing executive working 60-hour weeks. She initially struggled to find time for GMAT prep, but after implementing some of these tips, she was able to transform her approach. Sarah identified that she was most productive in the early mornings, so she started waking up at 5 a.m. to study for 2 hours before work. She also made a study plan that focused heavily on her weaknesses in critical reasoning and reading comprehension while maintaining her quant skills. On weekends, she dedicated 4-hour blocks to taking full-length practice tests, mimicking the actual GMAT experience. But Sarah didn't just study mindlessly. She analyzed her mistakes, identified various patterns, and adjusted her strategy accordingly. Whenever she felt overwhelmed or burnt out, she took a break, sometimes just a short walk around the block, other times a night out with friends. In the end, Sarah's consistent and strategic approach paid off. She scored a 655 on the GMAT, well above her target of 625. Her story is a testament to the fact that with the right mindset and methodology, even the busiest working professionals can conquer the GMAT. So there you have it, folks. With dedication, strategic planning, and a healthy work-life balance, that 655 plus GMAT score is totally within your reach as a working professional. Just remember to stay consistent, prioritize your weaknesses, and avoid burnout at all costs. You've got this. Now, let me know if you have any other questions or need further guidance along the way. So, what are you waiting for? Hit that like button, share this video with your fellow GMAT warriors, and subscribe for more invaluable content to help you slay the GMAT. Until next time, keep grinding, implement those hacks, and never lose sight of your GMAT goals. Embrace the journey, celebrate your progress, and know that with unwavering determination and the right strategies, you've got this. Let's go out there and show the GMAT who's boss.